the use of artificial intelligence in drug discovery has been on for just over a decade now. Previously, it used to be the traditional in vitro and in vivo tests. In vitro meaning in the test tubes, and in vivo meaning in animal models. But over a decade ago, people started to understand the ability for you to use artificial intelligence to create models which could quickly screen some of these synergies, products which have activity and what they have activity against. But what makes this particular discovery quite important is that prior to now, the type of machine learning, the type of AI that has been used has been mostly supervised. And there is a more unsupervised approach this time around, which is sort of like telling the artificial intelligence not to follow a definite pattern, but to scan through everything and then find us some new intervention.
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
I mean, that is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and it is. I think this particular discovery is actually going to change the paradigm in drug discovery. So when we were in pharmacy school 20 years ago, we used to learn that first you'd get phytomedicines or the chemical molecules, then you test them in test tubes, and then afterwards, if they have activity against a particular microorganism, then you start testing in models. This takes hundreds of hours and millions of dollars. And what these guys have done is develop an artificial intelligence model that runs 100 million of these combinations in hours.
So let me just get this, because you're a scientist. I'm not. And a lot of people out there are not. So essentially, they used data to train a computer to learn molecular features associated with antibacterial activity. They then applied that learn model, if you like, to a drug repurposing library and challenged the model to identify molecules that are predicted to have antibacterial activity, but don't look like existing antibiotics. In other words, they challenge them, don't look for the ones that exist, look for new ones. And one molecule out of that library fit those criteria.
So the slight correction in what you said, they didn't say don't look for the ones that look like antibiotics. They just said look for anything.
Right.
Look for anything.
So when they then find everything, they can pick the ones. Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's what makes AI different from a scientist.
Right.
I've been trained, pharmacy school, science training, medical school, you're talking of decades of training. And in the decades of training, in addition, in as much as you're being trained to understand the technical aspects of science, observation, comparison, instinctively, there are certain, how would I put it now, sensibilities you pick up along the way.
Sure.
You become prejudiced to certain preconditions. So you know that a benzene model is key to a particular compound.
Yes.
So if you see 1,000 formulas or 1,000 structures of different models, instinctively the scientist will move to the structure that looks like what he learned in school.
That is
AI doesn't have
those
that.
prejudices.
No
basically.
prejudices.
Right.
That was the word I was looking for.
Yes.
AI has no prejudices, and that's what makes this particular find interesting.
And so going to that particular find, that molecule that was then isolated turned out to be halicin.
Halicin, yes.
Right, one of the most powerful antibiotics discovered today. What was their knowledge of halicin before they went through the process that you've just described? I understand it was virtually zero, basically.
Well, it had some activity against diabetes.
Right.
So that's how it found its way into that database that you spoke of earlier on. The good thing about a lot of research institutes in the developed world is that they maintain a huge database.
Yes.
So halicin had been tried in the past, and it was found to have some diabetic activity, but for some reason, it didn't move from the preclinical stage to the clinical stage.
Right.
And so it found itself in that database. And you have so many others in that database. So what they did was, when they reconfigured the assignment for the algorithm,
right,
that brought this up, they looked at the database, but this time around repurposed it for antimicrobial activity.
Right.
And then it popped up.
So this is a case, just trying to follow your very intelligent description there. This is a case of something being right under their noses.
Absolutely.
And AI being able to tell them to look at this in a different way.
Absolutely.
So is it fair to say that they would never have looked at it in a different way had it not been for AI? We've got about 30 seconds before we have to take a
Never
break.
is a strong word. As scientists,
Yeah.
we don't say never, but almost never.
Right.
Almost never.